Welcome into the Backroads Bill podcast. I'm Ben, and we've had a number of authors on this program before, talking about the outdoors, talking about exploration, adventure, all of those great things. But today it's a little bit of a first because we are going to have on as guests today Christine Fischer Guy, who wrote a novel, The Umbrella Mender, which is a fictional novel that covers the 1950 tuberculosis outbreak that happened in Moose Factory, again, back in the 1950s. And there's actually a really cool real-life tie that Christine has to this event that actually happened. And her novel is about a fictitious nurse who has to go up there and help, of course, treat the Indigenous population that's up there. And it's such a neat novel, first of all, but also a really interesting look into kind of what happened during that time. And we get into all sorts of topics through this conversation, the inspiration that she got to get there, of course, the real life connection, her traveling up to Moose Factory actually to really get an idea of what life is like up there for somebody who's never been there before. So all of that on the way, but first a word from today's sponsor, Homewood Suites by Hilton North Bay.
Hey North Bay, it's time to celebrate. The city is turning 100 and Homewood Suites by Hilton North Bay invites you to the party. Be at home in our spacious suites, each featuring a kitchen. Yeah, a real kitchen. Also, enjoy our comfy living spaces and brand new fitness gear so you can keep feeling great while staying on budget. Planning a big bash or business event? We've got the perfect meeting spaces right here on site. Plus, with our partnerships at The Grand and Stock Transportation, your guests and delegates are in great hands. Want to know the best part? We're right beside the beautiful Cape Paceway, steps to North Bay's lively waterfront, and moments from downtown's shopping, dining, and entertainment. Celebrate the Centennial with us all year long with an exclusive discount. Just use the code CENTENNIAL when booking your stay. Be at home with Homewood Suites by Hilton North Bay. Join the party today at 495 Oak Street West or call us at 705-495-3000.
So today we are pleased to have on the program Christine Fischer Guy, who is a author and journalist. Christine, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
I was very close. I keep wanting to say Christina because I've worked with a Christina. There was another Christina there, and I almost wrote Christina down. And then the funny thing was, this was months ago, I accidentally flipped that where I called the Christina I knew Christine, and it was like a huge deal. So I'm glad I got the name right.
Well, I'm glad you got the name. That the names are always most important, and her name's right on the front of the book, Christine Fischer Guy, and from the author of The Umbrella Mender. And Christine was with us at the Earth Day Book Talk at the Canadian Ecology Centre a few years ago, and I thought, on the Backroads Bill podcast, it's always about sense of place. And this book is all about sense of place. And we're going to talk about that sense of place, I think, extensively on the Backroads Bill podcast today. But Christine, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself other than being a journalist author, because I know it took a decade to write this book alone. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So the book, this book took 7 years. It's
7 years.
The next book that took 10 years. So I have a master's. I got a master's fairly young, and it really whet my appetite for research. So I tend to choose projects that are very research intensive because I actually love that. It's my favorite part. I love going down the rabbit holes and learning about new things. So I'm either writing or teaching writing. I have taught writing at University of Toronto, and I teach writing in corporate workshops, but otherwise I'm writing. So I write short stories and novels and journalism, and all kinds of different sorts of editing I've done. But as far outside of work, I actually really love to be outside. It's during the pandemic here in Toronto, it was torturous too. In the early days, they were telling us to not go outside even, really. And because we're so population dense, and I just thought, well, okay, that's not going to work. So I would go out in the early morning, like really early morning, just to get outside. And it was pretty eerie during those early days of the pandemic because I would be crossing the lakeshore. I live pretty close to High Park, and I would be crossing the lakeshore to go down to the lake, which I do very often. I have my Instagram account has a hashtag that I made up, which is lake meetings. So I have to go meet the lake in the morning. But I love to be outside. And so going up north to research that book, it was a great adventure of my life. But I'm a cyclist. I've been a Yogini for 25 years now.
Yogini, is that, wait a second, pause, time out. Yogini.
That's the correct term for someone who practices yoga. I'm not a teacher. I am a practitioner of yoga.
I also do yoga.
Yeah.
So am I a Yogini as well?
Yes, you are.
Yep. I'm going to use that word. I'm going to put that on my LinkedIn profile.
Ben, it was worthwhile
Yogini.
showing up for today's show. Absolutely, positively. But Christine, you answered actually not a question I was going to ask you, but Hazel, one of the main character in the Umbrella Mender, she goes outside quite a bit. Because for a number of different reasons, and we're not going to give the storyline completely away here because we want people to find this book and read it because there is such a gripping storyline to it. But tell us about, Dr. Davies is another main character, but I think it was your great uncle who was a doctor and was part of the tuberculosis. And again, tuberculosis is still in the news today. And as you said, you like to go down a rabbit hole of research. And this is all about, the Umbrella Mender, you might as well have been in part, in the middle of a pandemic as we just all experienced. But you actually talked about being a part of one. Whoops, I got to move this way into the camera in the Umbrella Mender.
You'll get there.
Yeah, I'll get there.
That was a funny thing because when this pandemic started to come down, I felt like I knew what was coming, and other people were saying this is going to be over in a couple of months, and I thought, no, it's not, because I have been talking to infectious disease researchers and physicians, and one of them in particular, who was the head of infectious disease at that time at University Network Hospital, said, and this was about, I think it was 2008 or 2009, I was still in early stage research. He said, we know there's going to be a big pandemic, we just don't know when. And at the time I was like, wow, that's super scary. I'm not going to think about that anymore. But when it all started to come down, and we have since, and during the process of learning about what we were dealing with, we learned it's an airborne infectious disease, which is the same thing as tuberculosis is. So once that was, nailed down by people who know much more about infectious disease than I do, I felt like I knew that we were in this for quite a long time, because I had done extensive research on the impact of tuberculosis on society and the ways that it changed, really fundamentally changed society. So that was a very different experience of a pandemic for me, and I'm sure for all doctors involved with that kind of research, for them as well. That was interesting.
well, the parallel with COVID, but it became more authentic, I think, when people read the book, is that you were up there on an Ontario Arts Council grant, and you spent, I think, more than a week up there. Because what struck me, because I've been to Moosonee and Moose Factory many times, and I was in Cochrane just the other day, which will lead me to a final question a little later on. But it's a surprise, Ben. And but you were there, and of course, one of the themes of the Backroads Bill podcast is about sense of place in Northern Ontario, and that was another reason to have you on. But references to Sawpit Island, Hayes Island, and just the length of the island, and the characters walk around the island, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, did you have to go there to set the setting for the novel because you wanted to have it there because of the tuberculosis, which was experienced there back in the day?
Well, I didn't actually get to Moose Factory until quite far into the writing of the book. I kept wanting to, but for different reasons, I couldn't get up there. Actually, and the year I did actually go up there, there was a huge flood on the island, and I was scheduled to go there in May, but I actually couldn't go there until September because the cleanup took so long. But I was actually looking at Moose Factory in the early stages of writing. Do you remember Google Earth?
Yeah.
So I was using Google Earth because it's really important for me. Visuals are super important to me when I'm creating. So I had lots of photographs, and which my great uncle through marriage gave me of his time up there. He was a pioneering TB doctor. But I also wanted to get a real sense of the place. So I did get a pretty good sense of the place, like, at least topographically from Google Earth. But in the end, I just, like you, Bill, like I needed to walk on those roads. I needed to like be in those forests and be at the side of the Moose River, and I actually had I chartered a little boat to have them take me to the very southernmost southernmost part of James Bay, because I thought that would be really useful for me to help. It's scaffolding, really. It's scaffolding for my imagination, and I get grounded in a sense of place, which for me it is really important that it comes across in my work, because I want my readers to feel like they have been there.
Yeah. Now, you also you spoke to many people when you were up there, and I was wondering about Elder Daisy Turner and others. What did you learn from them?
That was such a lucky circumstance for me. Before I came up to Moose Factory, I did all of the usual journalist things that I had done in the past, which was send emails, leave phone messages, try to set up meetings. I didn't get a single one returned. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to be bold and I'm just going to walk into the hospital then, because I couldn't get anybody to answer me I don't know why. But so the first day I walked in there, somebody recognized me within about 5 minutes as being not from around there. So it's, I don't live in a small community, so it didn't occur to me that I would stick out up there, because in Toronto, you just blend in everywhere, So in any case, they asked if they could help me with anything, and I said what I was there for. And she said, well, let me take you to the chief of staff. So she took me up to the chief of staff. And then when I told him about my great uncle's memoir, his name was he has passed away now, but his name was Dr. Barclay McCone. And when I said that name, all the doors to the hospital opened, because the chief of staff knew him. And so then he paired me with the chief of the nursing director. And she actually took me to the Elder Lodge where Daisy Turner was. And there were others who had actually worked in the hospital as staff in the time of my novel, which this was beyond my wildest imaginings, Bill. Like I didn't think I was going to find anything that close to that in terms of my ability to try to create this world. So that's how I met Daisy Turner. And I sat with her, and she told me a lot about the time period. And she loaned me some books to look at. And it was really just a wealth of very useful information for someone trying to recreate a period. So that was extremely lucky that happened. So Daisy, when I went back up again with the book in 2014, I brought a box of books, and I did find Daisy, she was living with her family at that time, and so I got a copy of the book to her. So, but she was invaluable, and then the nursing director drove me around and pointed out things and got me in touch with other people. What I found in Moose Factory that year was just such a welcoming community. And the people up there were incredibly generous with information and time and meals. And it was really, I have very many fond memories.
They're still in pursuit of a new hospital, but you also received help from Joseph Boyden.
Yeah, Joel, I don't know him really well, but I had a couple of snippets of Cree in the novel, and he was able to link me with someone who a native speaker, just to make sure that I didn't have usage on the page that was incorrect. They were really tiny, like a word or two, but I just wanted to verify that I had the right word.
Right. Now, the main characters, Hazel and Gideon, as you said, you were well into writing the novel before you went up there. But how did that help crystallize those characters and their movements in the novel in the community?
Yeah, I had come up with Hazel and Gideon, or much before I got up there, but as we learn in the book, Gideon spends a lot of time in the bush, and that was really important to me to gain a sense of what the woods were like up there. I could only see so much from Google Earth. One of the happy accidents of walking in the woods in Moose Factory was coming across, it's called Old Man's Beard. I think the Latin word is usnea. And that was actually used as medicine for gram-positive bacteria, which tuberculosis is. So it's a traditional remedy for tuberculosis. So that was one of those like magical moments where things dovetail. You realize like, yep, this is why I'm here. This is why I have to be in this forest looking at these trees. Because for me, it just helps integrate everything.
Yeah, I put my hand on Old Man's Beard. 2 days ago, I was on the Cobby River, north of Constance Lake First Nation, north of Hearst, and I felt it. And funny you just mentioned that. There's a connection there right away. I also wondered, too, Gideon was fascinated with the Northwest Passage, and I remember in grade school studying about Captain Larson and the RCMP and the St. Roch. How did you weave that into the storyline? That's really interesting to me.
Yeah, that was so. When you asked, you told me you were going to talk about that. And I was trying to remember, how did I do that? What did I do with that piece of information? You know what? What happened was that I found a publication written by Larson about looking for. It was in the National like the Royal Society of the National Geographic. Like I told you, I go down really deep rabbit holes. So I found this thing that he wrote, and I decided that it would be something that Gideon would have read, because Gideon is a character he's kind of a wanderer. He's looking for the meaning of life. He's in that stage of life. He's in his, or 20s, as Hazel is. They're both pretty young, and figuring out who they are. And Gideon becomes obsessed with going north and finding the Northwest Passage. He's not really clear on the geography of all of that. He's a little bit naive in some ways. But this is his great trip that he's going to take, is to try to go that way. And so I gave that to him to have found and read. And that was how that piece of data came in there.
Now, before I turn it over to Ben, because I know I'm hogging the questions as per usual, but the nickname Gideon had for Hazel, is it EYAS? How do you pronounce that?
Ias.
Yeah, Ias. How did that come about?
Gideon was obsessed with falcons.
Yeah.
And so an Ias is a fledgling falcon.
Okay.
So Gideon sort of sees Hazel. They both quite intrigued with each other, and he sees her kind of as a fledgling. And so he gives her that nickname.
Okay, good. Well, and they are intrigued with each other, and I'm not going to give it away, from different perspectives. And Ben, and you're probably going to ask this question anyway, but just like, sure, in the characters, are there much of you in those characters?
I think every writer, if they're honest, like there's a part of you in every character you write, really, because you're writing it. But I think it's one of the great things about writing is that you can give your obsessions to a character. So I wasn't obsessed with falcons to the same degree as Gideon is, but I certainly was very intrigued with falcons. I actually went on a course, a one-day intro to falconing course at the Y Marsh, and I so loved that. And I thought, I want a bird of prey, but then I need 10 more acres at least to go with the bird, because you can't keep that kind of bird in a cage. You have to take it out and let it and fly it, and so that's a retirement project.
Yeah, more rabbit hole stuff though with taking that one day session with the falcon.
So we're almost in June, which means spring is over, summer's beginning. I don't really know when exactly summer starts. I think it's sometime, isn't it mid or late June? Anyways, it doesn't matter. It's been absolutely beautiful outside lately, especially if you've been in the North Bay and area kind of region where we've, even today, it was like plus 29 outside. It was absolutely gorgeous, almost a little too hot. I know people are going to not like me for saying that, but maybe a little bit too hot. But anyways, baseball season has just started here in Ontario. Of course, if you're in a men's league, or maybe if some of the high schools started a little bit earlier, but men's league and stuff, they've just kicked off in the last couple of weeks. So if you're in a baseball, softball, slow pitch, etc. team, or you just need something for sports, why don't you check out today's sponsor, Source for Sports, here in North Bay over on 1321 Fisher Street. I actually went there a couple weeks ago. I had to get some new equipment for baseball. I had to get a glove, some cleats, some new pants, and the team was absolutely fantastic that was there. I actually went into the employee door by accident because there's 2 doors there, and I went into the employee door, and the guy turned to me and he said, "Hey, you coming into work today?" And I was so caught off guard until I realized I was standing behind the counter, and we were kind of laughing about it. But Haas was the man who helped me. He was absolutely fantastic. He was super knowledgeable. He got me in and out within like 10 minutes and got me everything I needed. It was absolutely fantastic. And that was one of the advantages of, going to some of these local shops versus some of the bigger stores and bigger areas is the staff really, there's a level of care and love that they have when it comes to passion for what they do. And they're not just there to get a paycheck. And you really felt that when I went in there. And of course, I'm not just saying that because they're one of our sponsors. It was actually a really good experience. So the next time you find yourself in need of any sporting gear, whether it's summer, fall, winter, etc., go check out Source for Sports here in North Bay down at 1321 Fisher Street so Paul and his team can help you along your way.
Hi, I'm Graham Shaver, host of the Kindness Cast. Here to tell you the Kindness Project is back from June 9th to 13th. Do something kind, big or small, and share it on social media with the hashtag KindnessNorth. Also tune in that week to North Bay Echo's original shows, To North Bay with Love, Backroads Bill, Echo Essentials, and the Echo Sportscast featuring guests and topics all about kindness. The Kindness Project is powered by CMHA North Bay and District, helping to raise mental health awareness and create positive change in our communities, because kindness makes us all feel better. Head to kindnessnorth.ca to learn more.
Get in and go at North Bay Toyota. From the bold and adventurous RAV4 to the fuel-efficient and stylish Corolla Cross to the powerful and rugged Tacoma, there's a Toyota for everyone. Need extra space for the family? The Highlander, Grand Highlander, and Sienna. Want to go green? Check out Toyota's complete lineup of hybrid vehicles like the Prius, Camry, Crown, all-new Crown Signia, and more. Get in and go at North Bay Toyota. Visit them at 640 McEwen North Bay or toyota.com for details. I'm sure there's something in this novel that you did where you're like, nobody's going to appreciate that I did this, but it makes me happy. What is the thing in the novel where you go, people don't understand how cool this is, but I think it's really neat?
Oh, there were so many things like that. I would have a hard time choosing one.
Okay, give me like 3.
Well, I mean, traveling to Moose Factory is one of those things. I think it would have been possible to write the book without traveling there. And many people have written books to places they haven't traveled to. You can do lots of research and see photographs and movies, and you can do that. But I certainly do better when I can be walking in a place. And I think also the falconing day, that was ostensibly research, which was the story I told myself about it. But it turned out to be something that I loved doing. And so that was another one. And what would be another one? I think actually going in that little boat, chartering a boat and asking someone to take me up into James Bay, because that gave me a sense of the enormity of that piece of water, which, I mean, you can look at a map and say, yeah, that's a big piece of water, but you don't, until you get in there and you out there in like a 10-foot aluminum boat, you don't really understand it. Like it would be so easy to lose your bearings out there, if you didn't know what you were doing. So I guess that'd be the third one. Yeah. Obviously, there's a big focus on this with the Indigenous peoples, because obviously being up north, being in Moose Factory, it's a very heavily Indigenous population.
I guess, what is your tie to that kind of history, and I guess, was there a specific focus for you and I guess some of the struggles that the Indigenous peoples at this time have gone through? Because we talked to Paul C.C. Quasis, where it was very similar. That was up more in the Hudson Bay watershed kind of area, and the lives and what's happening there. So I guess it's a two-part. Number one, like the connection, but also trying to dive back into that time period, where they were in that time versus where they are now.
Mm-hmm. That was a thing that I struggled with quite a bit. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And during the time, like, because of the question, like, I'm obviously a settler and not Indigenous. But one of the things I decided was that then we would see the novel through the eyes of a settler nurse is a medic who's gone up there. And one thing to appreciate about that time period is that tuberculosis at this time is absolutely laying waste to northern Indigenous community. Like 9 in 10 people were dying. So just to give you a sense of the timeline of the development of the drugs for this is important backstory for your question. The streptomycin was discovered in 1947, and streptomycin was the first drug that would actually arrest the growth. No, it was actually bactericidal. They had drugs that would stop the growth but not kill it, and it was the first one that they discovered that would actually kill the bacteria. So tuberculosis has been with us from the beginning of time. So this was a major discovery, and they were using it among soldiers coming back from wars and settler population. And at some point, somebody realized, oh my God, there have been cross-pollinations, and now Indigenous people have it in their communities. One of the things that I read about was that it was the way it attacked the Indigenous cyst body was whole systemically, like in ways that it wasn't attacking the settler population, because we Europeans had seen this before. Our bodies historically had come across this. As a result, when people like my great uncle went up there with streptomycin, what they discovered is the treatment regimen that they used in the South wasn't actually working fully. People still, the tuberculosis wasn't cured yet, and they had to try some different things. So what I decided was that my character was going to be a settler who has gone up there as part of this force that was sent up there from Canada, from the federal government, because of that was how health was administered then, and I think still now. So we would see the story through her eyes. And having Indigenous characters in the book was another big question for me because of all of the above. But it felt like it would be a greater omission for me to have no Indigenous characters in my book, rather than be worried about having them speak. But in terms of that question, but I decided that I would not presume to be inside the thoughts of any Indigenous character, so that my character could only see what they were saying. It was really important to me to handle this sensitively, because because of the fact of the way it was handled, treatment of tuberculosis among Indigenous populations in Canada. I discovered some things that made me feel deeply uncomfortable, and that is why Hazel does what she does in the novel. She makes the decision that she makes, which it's one of the many things you'll find out about in the novel. But it took 10 years for the federal government to send translators on those boats. So people were being scooped up from their communities because they were legitimately sick. And in the first few years, they were willing to go along because they knew they were sick and they needed help. But tuberculosis, curing someone of TB takes years. And there was no communication with people that were in those original communities. So they thought, the settlers came and took their relatives away and they never saw them again. So after about 3 years of these survey boats, people would run for the hills, even if they were sick, in Indigenous communities. And this is actually part of the reason that rates of TB are still so high in the North, because there was a very deep distrust that was built during that period. And so it was really, I thought a lot about how I should handle that in my novel. And that's why we see it through Hazel's point of view.
Now, I'm not going to ask you this question just yet, but before we get to that final question, is that tell us what you're working on now and this novel to come, and if there's a working title, or what can you share about that? Because people, again, I've shown the book a number of times, but they need to read this book because of its storyline and its place for sure. But tell us what you're working on now, please.
My new book is coming out next year with Woolsack and Wind, the spring 2026, and it has a working title, but we're still working on the final title. So I will say it's about music. The working title is before the music, but it's going to change, and it's a novel about a young classical pianist who has, and so it's set in 2018. So not unlike the Umbrella Mender, which is all set is a historical novel. This novel is set in contemporary times, about her leaving to go to New York to work with a mentor because she has won a really lucky opportunity to develop herself as a classical musician. And she has, but the past actually plays a very important role because she comes from a family of musicians. Her grandmother was a silenced musician in 1968 Prague after the Warsaw Pact invasion. So that history has a role to play on the present, and that's what the book is about. I'll have that should hopefully will whet your appetite for the book.
Yeah, we'll look forward to it. Now, as I've said, I'm not Sheila Rogers or Eleanor Wachtel from the CBC on those storybook kind of sessions that they used to be on air. But this question, because I was just in Cochrane the other day, and I know Railway Street, and you described that in the first chapter, and at the end of the book, the main character seeks refuge and looks for this silo, this roofless silo, and I went looking for that. So how did that come about?
Did you find it, Bill?
Did you find the silo? What? I think I found the grove. You described the forest and the farmer's field. I found what I thought was the forest at the end, because it's not the other way towards Commando Lake, because I know Cochrane very well. So I went the way, because you describe how you went towards the highway, or Hazel went towards the highway, you being Hazel in a sense. So yeah, I just wondered how that concept came out, because that's all in the vein of creativity.
Yeah, you're right. No one's ever asked me that question, and thank you for asking that question. It just makes my day that you went looking for the silo, actually. The silo wasn't there. It was never there. The silo was the very beginning of the novel, and it was in Waterloo region, and I was out stomping around the backfields, and I came across this silo, and it had no roof. It had a little door, and some teenagers, I assume, had spray painted a picture of, like, stick figure of someone giving birth. And then beside it, they had written Caitlin's Birthing Center. And that was the beginning of the novel, of Hazel's story, Hazel's part of the novel. So that was where it jumped off, because then I started to have a million questions. Like, I started to think, who was in here? Did she actually give birth? Did some teenager come out here and give birth in the middle of the night? And why would they paint that? And, so these are the kinds of generative questions that are extremely useful to novelists, because it really fires up the imagination.
Well, in my imagination, I could see it quite clearly because it's well described, and so it is there at the end of Railway Street. I know it is, and so that's really important to the reader, but especially for Backroads Bill, because it's all about sense of place, and you described that to a T. And Ben, we've been once again enriched.
We're always enriched when we do this podcast. It's great. I guess I just have a few more questions here. The big one was we've talked to a number of people, not on this podcast. We've talked to a number of writers on this podcast, but on other podcasts that we have on the Echo Podcast Network, we've talked about publishing And we had one author on who, we were talking, I think it was off air, we were talking just about the struggles of trying to get published. And I just was curious your personal story with trying to get the Umbrella Mender and some of your works published, and maybe some of the struggles or some of the things that you were finally able to kind of get it out there into the world.
Publishing in Canada is, it can be a really difficult process because we're a fairly small population. And so it can, comparatively to other book publishing behemoths. So to have the story, have your book find its readers is really the great puzzle that every writer has to deal with. So, I was able to find a really supportive team at Woolsack and Wynne. Noelle and Paul both believed in the book very early and believed that it should be in the world to find its readers. So that, in many ways, is a lucky thing. It isn't something I think any writer can really depend on. I think we have different kinds of fiction too, and this sort of falls in a camp, a literary fiction camp that has a smaller readership than say thrillers or mystery novels. So that makes it a bit more challenging too, is just finding the publisher who believes in the work. And I mean, that's really the main thing you need, is for a publisher to look at it and say, yeah, this looks like our kind of book. And if you find that, then you're very lucky indeed. And the team was very supportive.
And what is the message that you as the author were trying to portray in this novel that you would like to get your readers to take away from it? Maybe outside of just what's on the surface, kind of underneath maybe some of the thematic messaging, or anything that you want them to take away after reading this novel?
I think I can't reduce the novel to themes, because I would hope that readers would find their own mirror. They would find, a window that they can look through. That's really what I want from my books, that readers will be able to look through a window they haven't looked through before, and that they'll see something that they haven't seen before. And then maybe they will be moved, that will move them to a different place in their lives, whatever that means for them. I think for me, that's the most we can ask of a book. I hope that it's done in a way that it's really entertaining as a story, because I very deeply believe that humans are storytelling creatures. This is how we interpret everything in our lives. And so storytelling is very important to me. It's a kind of a sacred responsibility to undertake, that you would try to get people to come into the world with you, this world that you've created, and tell them a really good story that will engage them, and it will mean different things to different people.
Yeah, no, and I was taken again. You described it earlier about Gideon being in the bush and in the setting in Moose Factory, and the struggles of all the characters. That was my takeaway. And again, there's some again, it's a gripping storyline, and the ending near the last part of the book, it just kind of, it's unusual.
I've read some really good things online as well, like outside of the novel, a lot of really great reviews, which is awesome to see. I don't know if you as an author, do you ever look at reviews at all? And is that something that you're like, are you afraid, or?
I have a good friend who's a novelist several books ahead of me, who I consider a mentor, and she gets her husband to vet, like, pre-read reviews, because some of them are wonderful and some of them are not. And if a book doesn't work for someone, that's fine. It's not going to be the same book for every reader. So my dear husband is my first reader, and he is also a person who will pre-read reviews and let me know if I should read them or not. So I try to handle it that way. Sometimes my curiosity gets the better of me, and sometimes that's not such a good thing. So yeah, generally, yes. Overall, I had some really nice reviews for that book, and I was very grateful for the critics who engaged seriously with the book, and for all of the readers who wrote on Goodreads. It's just very warming to have people respond to this story that I wrote.
Thank you for being on the Backroads Bill podcast, and I'm just going to do my review is a double thumbs up on the Umbrella Mender.
There you go.
Thank you,
Officially
Bill.
Backroads Bill approved.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm so pleased to hear that. It's lovely to talk with you about it.
A big thank you to Christine for jumping on with us. So if you want to check out the Umbrella Mender, go visit her website. The link is in the description. You can also grab it on Amazon as well. So if you enjoyed today's episode, you can find more episodes of the Backroads Bill podcast on your favorite podcast player, the video version on the North Bay Echo YouTube channel, or on northbayecho.ca, where you can find a bunch of other local podcasts like To North Bay with Love, Echo Essentials, and the Echo Sportscast, alongside other great shows that other very talented local people create and put out on a regular basis. So leave us a like, a comment, make sure you subscribe to not miss a single episode, and we will see you again next week for another Backroads adventure.
Dear North Bay, as a single mom and full-time student, life can feel overwhelming and budgets are always tight. But one thing I never question is how deeply I care about my community. When I began volunteering at the North Bay Regional Health Centre, I saw firsthand how much the healthcare system means to people, especially when life takes an unexpected turn. It made me think, what if it was my child, my parent, or my friend that was in need of care? That's when I realized I wanted to do more, to be part of something bigger than myself. I joined the I Give monthly club because even a small monthly gift can have a meaningful impact, helping ensure everyone in our community has access to the care they need right here at home. If you believe in strong, local health care, I hope you'll join me. Sign up at nbrhcfoundation.ca or call 705-495-8125. It's simple and it matters. With gratitude, Kim Cosgrove.